I don't know that there's a bigger difference at any position than linebacker at Penn State. On one hand, a solid starter, possibly one of the best players on the team, possibly a breakout star at one position. A complete unknown at another, and a huge misconception and a huge confusion at possibly a third spot. We're talking about linebackers today on the BWI Daily Edition Two-A-Days. BWI Daily Edition rolling along with Camp. Nate Bauer, my co-host and senior editor of Blue White Illustrated. What's going on?
Not much. Ready to roll. What's going on with you?
I'm just full go.
Yeah.
With camp, with previews, with work. We're doing a whole bunch of stuff today and this week on the BWI Daily Edition. So I have no polite banter today. I'm fresh out.
Yeah, there's no time for that.
I like to be creative every once in a while, and my brain is just like football. That's it. So linebackers. Let's talk about linebackers.
Yep.
So talk.
Anything? Well,
yeah. I mean, I set it up one way, about a wide variety of conversation when we talk about linebackers on Penn State's team, and a lot of them for Penn State fans that may be checked out for the summer and haven't been following along with Blue White Illustrated. First off, how you doing? I'm Thomas Frank Carr. That's Nate Bauer. This is the BWI Daily Edition. And there's some changes to the linebacker room that we're going to talk about in just a little bit. And we'll try to clarify all of those things for you here on the show. But when you take a broad view of this group, and we'll introduce you to them right now, when you have the starters here, and I use starters in air quotes. Curtis Jacobs, locked in, one of the leaders of the team. One of the best players on the team, potential breakout star. The middle linebacker position, completely open right now. So how do you read this room and its potential this year?
Yeah, there is no question that James Franklin, others called it the biggest, question, I guess, thing to resolve of the preseason is Mike linebacker. Really, Tyler Elsdon and Kobe King. And so one of those two guys has to be the quarterback, more or less, of the defense. And so it's about figuring that out, figure out between the two of those guys who fits the best and who has the most command of the defense, who can play the best. And then really, at the other two spots, and I'm going to keep calling it two spots for now, just in the sense that John Sutherland obviously made the position switch from last year to this year to full-time linebacker, quote unquote. This was something that had been done last preseason, right? Like people kind of forget about that. So we're contextualizing it as though this was a Manny Diaz thing, but this was a John Sutherland thing as well. This was something that had been explored previously, was him playing as something of a smaller linebacker. And then Curtis Jacobs, obviously,
what are your expectations? I want to go there. Curtis Jacobs making the switch there to the will linebacker position. What are your expectations for him this year?
Yeah, certainly it's, I don't know about superstar status, but star linebacker status, right? He has put in the time. He's gotten the experiences over the last couple of years to be reliable. And I think to bring that element of playmaking to the position that hasn't necessarily or wasn't necessarily there with, correct me if I'm wrong on this, but Brandon Smith. And he's got, at this point, the reps under his belt to be able to slide over to that position, have a grasp of it, have a grasp of what Manny Diaz wants to do defensively. And, in a best case scenario, really lead on that side of the ball.
Is it just the 6'3", 245 versus 6'1", 230? That could, because let me paint it this way. Curtis Jacobs, as you pointed out, playmaking ability to play coverage very well,
Correct,
and to be a physical player in the run game. But I don't know that he's gotten the same hype or the same run up as some of his predecessors. And when it comes to actual on-field production, I think what you just spelled out there is you're expecting more. So why are we not having that conversation in the same way about a guy like Curtis Jacobs that we have had previously with guys that had the size and the speed?
Yeah, I mean, look, you can talk as much as you want about Brandon Smith's athleticism. That's not up for debate. It's there. It's in the right. Like it's data. It's facts. I'm not saying anything incendiary here.
Yeah,
getting to convert an athlete of that talent into a football player, they're not necessarily the same thing. Curtis might have a very, very similar opportunity to do just as much as Brandon was able to do last year, but maybe even improve on it, right? With some timely playmaking. Like I said, I mean, it's just that role does not have to be necessarily the gap stuffer that the Mike linebacker has to be, right? I mean, it is a place where you can move a little bit sideline to sideline and let that instinct, let the horses run, so to speak, and just make plays. And so whether that's out of the backfield or whether that's interceptions and passes deflected, what have you, I think that he brings both of those elements to the field.
So when it comes to Manny Diaz and the new scheme, you talked to Manny this offseason. You asked a lot of insightful questions, getting a lot of good information from him, and he was very forthcoming. When it comes to what the linebackers, what he's expecting of those players, especially the two in the box, the Mike and the Will, are you seeing any sort of difference? Are you seeing any sort of way they're going to be used differently that might manifest a different result outside of the player change?
Those two? No, not to me. I don't know. Like, I think that certainly you can speak better to that than I can. It certainly seems to me as though they're the two positions that will be on the field the most based on my impressions of what he's deciding out of the secondary, right? I mean, he's got all these decisions to make between having three safeties on the field, three corners on the field, right? Versus three linebackers on the field. That's the give and take that he more or less, said this summer were the things that he had to decide and figure out this preseason. Yeah. But I'm making some assumptions here. I think that with the quality that he has at his disposal and some of the things that we've talked about previously in terms of how aggressive he wants to be in the secondary, it certainly appears to me as though those 5 defensive back packages are something that will be on the field quite a bit. I mean, like this is something that we've been talking about for 5-7 years now, is, that look of 3 linebackers, 3 kind of traditional linebackers on the field it's fading. It's just not something that you see all the time.
And certain players can revive it. Again, like Curtis Jacobs being a player that you want to have on the field as much as possible. And one thing he said to me on the BWI Daily Edition when he came on, I think it was last month, was he's excited to play third down again because that is an area of his game that is a strength of his. But he came off the field for exactly what you're talking about. Daquan Hardy comes in as a slot corner, and you need to take that player off the field, and you play with, a 5 defensive back look. So let's talk finally, before we get into some of the depth players and freshmen, when it comes to that third linebacker position. Now, we're going to do a full breakdown of this position when we take a look at the safeties, because the bodies that they've selected from to fill that role so far have been safety-like bodies. So there are more coming in the class of 2022 and some transfers that we'll get into that a little bit during the safety conversation. But there is this conversation about, is it a linebacker? Is it a safety? Penn State has been adamant calling Jonathan Sutherland a linebacker. And this is a conversation that happens frequently on the BWI message board of X, Y, and Z underclassmen are going to definitely see time behind Jonathan Sutherland. Am I crazy for saying I don't think that's the way everybody's like, you have a misconception about that? Or, is there something from your conversation with Manny Diaz that maybe I'm missing something there.
No, it certainly appeared to me as though that was the direction. Again, I struggle sometimes with the pigeonholing that we want to do, right? Koa Farmer, right? Like, what was he? Like, it just feels like we're kind of talking about something that is more or less the same thing, even though there are differences. And so I think that one of the things that Manny Diaz said, and I thought, it was excellent at the time, is the beauty of his defense, or in his mind, playing defense, is the nuance, and it's the technicalities. And so the more that they can have those options, and the more that they can dial that down, the more beautiful it can become, and obviously the better production they'll have, and the better performances they'll have. So no, I mean, a small linebacker, a big safety, someone who specializes in pass coverage, but can also play in the box. Yes. Fill it all. Get as many of those qualities as you possibly can into that position. And I think they're open to whatever it is, right? Whoever can fill that, regardless of necessarily the body size, they'll be able to, they'll take a look at those guys and put them in that position.
So let's talk about some of the players that are definitely linebackers here, that are definitely a part of the conversation at linebacker. And one of the guys that I think is very interesting here, and we'll lump him in with the freshman, is Jamari Budden. Jamari Budden, a second-year player, 6'2", 6'3", 220 pounds. When I talked to him during the spring, he said, I'm playing the will linebacker position. Conversation about freshman Abdul Carter, the way that the staff has talked about Abdul Carter, his physicality, his potential, and his also serious, dedicated mental approach. How does that shake out here? Does Jamari Budden, does he get jumped on the roster by somebody like Abdul Carter, or are we overlooking him? Because I'm very curious about what to do with him in this picture.
I mean, look, I'd like to see week 3, right? Like, let me know in week 3 of preseason practice, at least, if not into the 3rd week of the actual season, before it becomes clear. I think, like, is Abdul Carter or Mike, right? Like bottom line, is he a Mike? Because
what they keep talking about him this is the interesting thing, is that they keep talking about him, but they change how they talk about him based on how they feel about other players on the roster.
Correct.
It seems.
Correct. And so it seemed to me that James Franklin put it in before the start of spring practice. He talked about Abdul Carter as kind of that third guy at Mike linebacker. But by the end of spring practice, when everyone was feeling much, much better about Mike linebacker because of Elsdon and Kobe King, that changed. That changed to, maybe we'll try him out at the will, right? Like, and so that seems to me to be where this is headed, is simply having a better grasp of who is the third string Mike, if it's not Abdul Carter.
Right. And
I don't know.
Here's the other part of it, and that's why it seems like they want to get Abdul on the field this season. When we talk about and James Franklin says at Big Ten Media Day, is we've got more guys in the class of 2022 that we feel like can contribute early in their careers. A guy we don't talk about enough is Abdul Carter because of all this ambiguity, but he is definitely a guy that Franklin has brought up repeatedly, which then becomes a question like, are you taking Curtis Jacobs off the field? Is he getting spelled more? Is it not Jamari Budden then? So it's a very interesting situation. And I think that's an underrated battle that's going to go on, as you mentioned, through week 3 of the camp and then going further on into the season. We haven't gotten to an X factor yet for this, and I want to get through this and then get to the stock up, stock down for this group before we get out of here. So what is your X factor for this particular group?
It's to me, it's the Mike. I think that Jacobs, I'm not going to say that exactly what you're going to get, because I think even last year he was kind of just scratching the surface of what he's capable of doing. I think honestly that he really does have an opportunity to be a game-changing type of player. But for the group on the whole, I just think that finding that Mike, and whether it's Elsdon or Kobe King, may the best man win, right? Both of them are going to play. That's kind of the bottom line there. They're going to be in good shape. They're going to be in pretty good shape.
I think Elsdon in particular fits this defense well as a guy who plugs holes and attacks downhill really well. The question just becomes, Manny Diaz likes fast-flowing linebackers. Is he the guy that can cover and can run sideline to sideline instead of just downhill? And then Kobe King is up to 245 pounds now. I just am curious to see, he's always a fluid athlete on film. What's he like? What's the rest of it like? So to me, I'm still going to go with that the X factor is kind of the dark horse here of what does Abdul Carter do in his first season at Penn State. So let's get to our stock up, stock down with all of that considered for this position. Stock up or stock down for the linebackers?
Stock down with the opportunity to go up through the course of the season, but stock down. Nobody talks about Ellis Brooks, and they should.
We should.
He was consistent. He really played good football throughout last season, and especially by the end of last season. And so I think that, yes, Brandon Smith is a loss for sure, but losing Ellis Brooks is a bigger deal. He just had that presence and had that consistency that you feel much better about everything, right? When that position is, you don't have to have spectacular there to have a ton of success.
Yeah.
And so it's just a matter of, hey, are the guys that can fill in this season, one, are they ready? Are they ready for that? Right? Forget about how they compare with each other. It's, are they ready to stop offenses? And that's going to be something that's to be determined through the course of this season.
Yep. And I think you have make a good point that you can replicate what Ellis Brooks did, but it's because those guys are smart and tenacious and are not messing up their job and are just overall good football players. There is the talent there to replicate what Ellis Brooks brought, but all the intangible stuff, I think that's a fair reason of why stock down is here, even though you have some really good players and maybe better producers in Curtis Jacobs, but the high-end threshold of this group does come down a bit. So that'll do it for our preview of linebackers. Make sure you subscribe here on YouTube. If you're checking out the BWI Daily Edition, make sure on wherever you get your podcast, you subscribe, rate, review, all that great stuff, and make sure you subscribe on YouTube. I'm your host, Thomas Frank Carr. We'll be back with more Penn State breakdowns. The secondary. Getting down to it, Nate. That's the last of it coming up later this week.